Welcome back to Chris in Retro. This is where we take a retrospective look at my journey and the journey of my guests, and we understand that there's moments in our life when we're living high-risk living, and things can fall apart in those places. There's also times when things are not going so well, and hope definitely doesn't seem available. What we try to do is show you that both options are closer than they appear, and through our stories, hopefully give you a better visibility to it. You know, recently I've been noticing an awful lot of conversation around spirituality, God, the universe, end times, all these things. And I can't help but wonder why those conversations are happening now. And, you know, I have a personal bias towards all that based on my journey and things that you understand about me. But I want to have a conversation about that and see, you know, what is actually going on there. I can tell you from my personal life recently, I have faith, but I have questions. And there's been days when my faith has been rocked, and I challenge, do I understand who God is? Based on my history of decision-making, have I made even the correct decision about something so serious as the spiritual component of my life? Well, I felt that today, you know, we needed some help with those questions. I recently heard a song by a hip-hop artist called A$AP Preach, and he does a mix of a popular worship song called Break Every Chain. The song I don't particularly care for because it's pretty monotonous, and I'm not a big fan of monotony. But his portion of it is pretty powerful, and it speaks very much to this season of my life. And he says, I have faith, but I have a lot of questions, and that's where this notion came from, is that, you know, it's okay to be there, and I'm trying to discover what those answers are. What's not okay is for me to sit here and rest on my own information. And so what I hope to today with my audience and with my guest is to help you find some answers to maybe the questions that you're having as well. To help answer these questions today is my pastor and my friend, my guest, Craig Cooper. Welcome to the show, Craig.
It's great to be here, Chris.
I'm really glad you're here. You know, there's a lot of spiritual gurus out there. So I figured I'd go to an authentic person. So thank you for coming.
Yeah, I'm sure I'm not a spiritual guru, but I'll do my best.
Oh, you're a guru. We're just trying to figure out what. And at the end of the show, we're going to know.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah, it's funny because in my journey, the church, and we'll get into some of this stuff, but Crosswinds, the church that you pastor, was a church that I was involved in prior to any of my recovery. I've been in that church drunk.
Yeah, you've been here longer than I have.
Yeah, for sure. You were not there long before that. And so that's been a part of my journey. But it also, I think, speaks to the different stages of what I believe to be true about God and this whole area of spirituality. So my audience comes here for a lot of reasons. And we've had, you know, murderers on here. We've had, you know, MMA guys, all kinds of things. It's a secular channel. So we're going to have an audience that's going to say, okay, well, why are we doing church? Well, we're doing church because a lot of people are talking an awful lot about the spiritual component. And so I guess we'll jump right into it. You know, why is everybody talking about the end of the world?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And I've probably gotten more questions about the end times recently than, you know, I've been pastoring for over 30 years,
okay.
Probably in the past 30 years. And I think part of it is, and I shouldn't say more than the past 30 years, I've found that when the world seems to be especially out of order, you know, and, you know, everyone has to define for themselves what that looks like. But when life seems to be going, you know, on cruise, which doesn't happen long for any of us. But when it is, we're not looking at those questions. But when things tend to go out of control, and especially when there's a lot of things that we can't control, which is most things in life, but we look at the world, I think we start to ask those deeper questions. You know, is this the end time? You know, people who don't necessarily believe the Bible to be true or any spiritual book to be true, all of a sudden ask, well, if they are true, what do they say about this? You know, and I think the disorder in the world just lends itself to that question. You know, is this the end? You know,
right.
and sometimes I think it's a question that's asked either, you know, with some fear. And sometimes I think it's a question that's asked with a little bit of hope. You know, is this going to be done? You know, is this
depends on your frame
it's
of
all
mind.
where you're at. And,
Yeah.
and you know, and so I think, you know, for a number of reasons, people are asking the questions, but the disorder in the world has to be one of the reasons why those questions are being brought up now.
Right. I find it interesting, though, that the disorder and the chaos that we've created, we're in control when we blow everything up. We think we got everything under control, and now all of a sudden when it blows up, now we got to look for some mystery.
Absolutely.
It must be something else ending the world. It has nothing to do with my own ability to burn everything to the ground.
Well, it's always easier to look at someone else or something else, right, than
Right.
to look at ourselves.
I mean, and not to scare anybody off, so I probably going to probably get canceled after this whole thing, but is it ending? I mean, or is this just a bunch of hype? Is this another cycle of the hype?
Well, as a pastor, and I'm a Christian, unapologetically, and
I didn't know that.
Yeah, you didn't have any idea, did you?
Well, here we go.
But so from a biblical perspective, once Christ ascended to heaven, the end was nearer, and so every day we're closer to the end. Whether that's going to happen in our lifetime or not, I'm not sure. I want to be ready if it is. But I want to be able to plan and live as if it may not be. Every generation has thought their generation is the generation, right? And so I don't want to fall into that trap. And I'm not real big on making charts and all those things. The scripture's really clear that only God knows the time. So I always joke that once we think we know the time, God's like, well, that's not going to happen because I'm God and you're not. And so,
well, you think about the predictions over time, over the last several years.
Tons of them, right?
Yeah. Y2K, we had, Nostradamus has predicted all kinds of things that I think happen. I'm not sure. They seem to happen later on. They say they happen. I don't remember them happening.
So much easier when you do that, right? When it happens and you go, yeah, that's what he was talking about. Yeah, exactly.
I remember. So I grew up around a Christian home, and so this is what I would equate this season to, and now watch. The world ends as we get out of this room. But this season feels an awful lot like casting out demons and the backwards masking on albums.
Yes,
so everybody that had a Kiss album, you had to go burn it at a bonfire to youth group because
I remember that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Was telling
and
you
then everyone
people.
regretted it later when they're like, "I wish we still had those albums," and they're gone. Right?
Exactly.
They're all because all the money was burned up.
Yeah, because that's all it really said. There was really nothing in it.
Yeah, I used to think, how warped do you have to be to actually sit there and make words out of those noises, right?
I don't know. Well, that's what was going on. So I caution that there is some validity to some concerns that people have relative to the world is groaning, as they say, and there are things happening, and I want to question some of those things from you as well.
Yeah, and I'm not making, I don't want to make light of the fact that we're living in the end times.
Right. I
just want to alleviate fear from those, especially those in my faith system. If you know Christ, there's nothing to fear.
Right.
I don't fear the end time.
So for somebody like me, I want to push on that one.
Yeah, go ahead.
So for somebody like me, I'm a Christian.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I'm not a religious person. I say it on the show all the time. And in fact, I struggle with religion.
Sure.
I really do. And, but for me, God became real to me in one of the darkest seasons of my life. The fear-based part of this is that, you seem confident. Like you're so confident. And I said it in the beginning monologue, my faith gets shaken. So when I see all this stuff going on around me, I may, in my cynical tone, deal with it, or I may take it seriously, or based on whatever mental health condition I have, or my addiction, or whatever else is going on here. I see you strong in your faith, and I can say I believe it, because I do. But in my head, I'm not as confident as you about that. So how does somebody like me in that situation come to the stable ground that you found?
Well, I think the real key is, and, look, I question things too. I think it's okay to question. There's certainly areas of scripture where I'm still working through. I don't understand everything. So I'm not the answer man for the entire Bible. I believe the Bible is true. I understand what's necessary to understand. But, when we talk about the end times, there's a lot there, to be real honest with you. I don't totally understand. And I'm going to be preaching on that in 2 weeks. And so I'm going to preach on what I understand.
Gotcha.
So it'll be a shorter message, and that people will probably be happier with that. But my confidence doesn't come in upon myself. So, my confidence is I'm not self-confident. I would describe it as a God confidence. And so those areas, I know enough about God to believe he's true. He's real and that he's active in my life. And that gives me enough confidence to head into whatever is ahead and know, well, he's in control of that. And so there's things that I am in control of. I'm accountable to the decisions I make. But ultimately, I know when I stand before him, again, and we're talking, I'm a Christian. So I believe Christ has already paid the price for the sins that I've committed. And so when I stand before him, it's on Christ I'm confident. I'm confident on what he's done.
Right.
Look, if I look back on what I've done, there's some things I'm proud of and a lot of things I'm not. Some things were good, worked out really well. Some things were just boneheaded decisions. And at the end of the day, I can't have confidence in that.
That's probably where I connected with you. Is that
the boneheaded
capabilities. I mean, I sense that capability.
There's enough of them there, that's for sure.
I appreciate that you're a pastor, but I was like, I can pick up this guy probably.
No. And we share the same, concerns. I consider myself a person of faith.
Yeah.
How most people would define religion. I'm not a religionist either in that sense. You know, I believe in a personal walk with God, and I believe in a doing journey with people. But yeah, I think the construct of that we can make of faith can cause people some harm when we try to make it of us and not of Him.
Right. I appreciate you taking the time, and we're going to get into probably more of some of that in a while. But that is that is difficult because even the approach that you've taken on this is one of the reasons why I think that this is a helpful conversation for my audience. I really believe that is because the tact that you take with this. You're not saying you must, you have to. You're saying that this is the option I've found and that works for me, and I believe it. And so for me, I can come to you understanding this is an authentic message. And I tell you, in my own personal journey and the rules of the Bible, I've broken them. And you're aware of many of the rules I've broken. And you're still my friend and come alongside me in those stages and say, water under the bridge, that's what's up. Here's what you got to deal with it and move forward. And I appreciate that about you. And I think that's really where we could do better as a Christian community versus a religious community, is to understand that we are all fellow travelers. We're all human beings. And where we have answers, we share them. And if people are willing to embrace them, they can. If they don't want to, they don't have to. But I just feel like there's a better way of then saying, I think where a lot of these arguments come into, and I'll get off this rant, but one of the biggest videos that I've had watched was one I did in my home studio, just reacting to some stuff where I saw two Christian YouTube channels battling each other live. And I was like, one of them, he speaks all the time about pop culture. So he's bringing in an audience that isn't really there to watch Christian arguments, but yet they're out there. And one of the big draws they had was a big argument about their belief system. And that turned me off. And I think a lot of my audience would agree with that.
Yeah, I think anytime we argue about those things, we've already lost.
Yeah,
a conversation.
Especially publicly.
Yeah, a conversation's helpful, but an actual argument is not.
Right. So I look at the environment we're in now. So we talk about as the end times, the real. But the other big one that's coming up right now is revivals.
Yes.
So you see people that are going to these magical places of revivals. I mean, over the years we've heard about Jesus showing up in toast and waffles and tapestries and God knows where. And now we're seeing revivals showing up everywhere. What is that all about? And are there magical locations for revivals? And is it worth me getting in a car to go to one of these places to be better?
Well, first of all, I guess I believe in revival. We've had significant revivals in the history of our own country, and certainly since the time of Christ. I mean, a revival is a group of people who have repented of their sin together, realize, hey, look, we've done some wrong, and we want to be on the right path, and let's be on the right path, and let's help others, lovingly, by sharing the love and message of Christ lovingly and caringly. Some amazing things have happened, and I believe in a personal revival that can happen in an individual's life. Is it amazing when it happens in a group of people's lives? I think sometimes we're quick to call something a revival, but I think you probably won't know if it's a revival until down the road.
It's an event.
Yeah. and a revival has lasting effects.
Right.
And so, the idea of driving to a revival, so I want to be really careful because there was a revival recently so-called revival at Asbury. Now, I think there was a spiritual movement at this college, this University Asbury. I actually had some friends who were there, and some amazing things were taking place in people's lives. People were really laying things down and starting on a right path. But my friend, I have another friend who drove there to see what was going on, and he did it because there was questions he had. But do I feel like he went there to experience something? I knew him better than that. No, he knew that anything that was happening there could happen wherever he's at. In other words, I don't have to spend a lot of money on an airplane ticket or gas for the Lord to meet me where I'm at. But I think we all sort of want to be where the excitement is, and I think that can be some of the draw, right? There's excitement and there's hype. Like I know a friend showed up and they were saying at this Asbury revival, but there were thousands of people there. Well, first of all, the chapel had limited space, so there wasn't tens of thousands. It's not that big. Second of all, when he showed up at first, it was during classes because it's a university. There were 20 people there. When the classes got out, it was packed. Right. And God did significant things. And so it's not my place to say, was it real, was it not? I think there'll be lasting effects. I really do. I think for decades, there's going to be people who have been impacted by that. But I get a little leery of especially, you talk about religionists, right? I get real leery of church people who just want to hop from one revival to another, one exciting experience to another. Because the reality is that that's just not really helpful in life.
Right. So to bring this to the audience, the reason I bring this up, and I'm candidly picking on some of them. Okay. So I appreciate you being fair about it, but I'm picking on some of them because where I found the reality of what I believe to be true wasn't in any of those environments.
Right.
I believe it can be anywhere. If this is the God, the version that I say God is, that I believe to be true, and I believe is consistent with what you say, it doesn't require a tent or it doesn't require a building.
No, and I'm sure your audience knows your story.
Yeah.
But you had what I would call a personal revival in a graveyard.
Yeah, for sure. Well, there and on a run.
Right. But, so that's a perfect example that God meets us where we're at.
Right. So when we're looking at, I look at this as where people are trying to find evidence.
Yes.
It's not faith, they're trying to find evidence. But beyond that, it also is an encampment. And what I mean by that is a psychological encampment. I feel like that when we get a sense that the media and music industry and Super Bowl halftime shows are optically satanic. We've called them satanic because there's a lot of red and a lot of horns and a lot of craziness. Because now we've got to create an encampment that combats that publicly.
Sure.
When in fact, what we're doing is creating a physical construct for a spiritual battle that actually is going on every single day, in my opinion.
No, I think we have to be careful, that we're not looking for simply an experience because emotions come and go.
That's a better word, experience.
And when we for me, my belief is when we are made right with God through Jesus Christ, right? And I know, I'm a pastor, so like I would say to anyone coming in the office, you invited a pastor in here. So.
No, I did. Scott. Yeah. Scott's the producer. Hey, Scott, we got a pastor in here.
So here's the pastor.
Hit the dump button.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. When you make that personal relationship with Jesus Christ, there's still work to be done. And so, and every day, I always joke and say, I don't wake up loving anybody. I'm not a morning person. So it's not like I wake up feeling it, It takes me a little while.
Yep.
And in my spiritual walk, just life in general, there's ups and downs, but again, God is my constant. It's not my emotions. It's not my events. It's not even my decisions. I have to own my decisions. The Lord gives me guidance and forgiveness, all that stuff. But at the end of the day, He's my constant. He's the one I'm trusting on. And I'm not trusting on an experience. I'm not trusting on, that if I go to this place, that they're going to do something for me that only God can do. And He can do it wherever you're at. Right now, someone listening to the podcast, God can meet them where they're at. You don't have to go anywhere.
Right. And that is, I think, an important element because most of my audience that will relate to my story at least has had times when nobody will go to where they're at.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And in fact, in many cases, won't even make eye contact with them or have created such a construct that anybody that was once close is no longer there. Out of that formation, I think probably one of the reasons why this God conversation, even when my faith is weak, I believe in it as much as I do is because of I'm a loyalty over love person. And I've noticed loyalty there that's consistently there, and it's not out of something I've created in my own mind because I have mental health issues. It was in effect, it was an outcome that was impossible with me, and so that's where my belief system came from. But there's a lot more to this too that's going on, and I know that I've categorized this interview with a lot of different questions relative to buckets, but this is really around a lot of the hype, and we are kind of intersecting some of the stuff we were talking about earlier. But I'm a YouTube guy. Obviously, we got a YouTube channel. I've got really 3 favorite YouTube channels. I actually posted this morning, and I get in the rabbit hole on YouTube big time. So hopefully, your favorite YouTube channels, Chris and Retro, if you guys are out there, like and subscribe. But we have. I'll get in my 3 favorite YouTube channels, or I'll big fight fan, so I'll watch fights and see what's going on, or see what's going on in public affairs, and I'll get in this rabbit hole, and eventually, within 5 minutes, I'm down looking at, chupacabra, and I'm finding some rare volcano they didn't find in the bottom of a shopping mall in Tallahassee, But what has been coming up is things like this: angels screaming from the ground, and
Sure.
the Euphrates is dried up.
Yes.
Are these signs and wonders, or are these the next level of clickbait?
Yeah, I think the real trapping at many times when we're looking for the signs is, in the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus shares, these are going to be the type of things that happen. And people have used those to say, oh, those things are happening, so He's coming back. But the things He talks about is there'll be wars and rumors of wars. I don't know a time in recorded history where that hasn't been true.
Right.
And I think sometimes we look at the signs, and there certainly are signs in Scripture, but those signs are to sort of get us to realize, okay, God's in control. These things are going to happen. get to it. Take responsibility for your day. Live today like you with no regrets. And if you have regrets, get over it and start over with the day you have left,
Right.
And so I think there's this something within us. You talk about. I'm a big Bigfoot fan, so I could watch a documentary on Bigfoot for hours. And
that got played for me. I'm done with Bigfoot.
Yeah, well, I'm still there. As a matter of fact, someone the other day in my mailbox at the church, put a Bigfoot sticker in there for me.
There's some guy in our city that actually drives around on the Jeep.
That's why they did it. I mentioned him.
Really?
I met him. Yeah, and I said, yeah, it's a Bigfoot hunter Jeep, right?
Yeah, he delivered Uber Eats to me the other day.
Absolutely. So I saw him and I talked to him, and so I said this to someone. So someone put the sticker in my box. Anyway, I say that to say I get it. There's a curiosity within us. The problem becomes when that curiosity moves from a mere curiosity to an obsession. When we're talking about, the euphrasia is drying up or whatever, all these things are things we should look at, and they have some implications, but we shouldn't make it more than it is. And so what if it is?
Right.
I mean, that's where I'm at. I'm like living today. I live in Canandaigua, New York. And so at the end of the day, I want to live the best life I can live in Canandaigua, New York. And if the end is today, it is. And if it's not, what a waste of time.
Right.
For me to be sitting here all worried and confused. Oh my goodness, what's going to happen?
Yep.
And then all of a sudden midnight strikes. I'm like, whoa, I guess there's another day. Well, how long am I going to live trapped? But, and I think some people try to over spiritualize the end time in the sense of this, getting people so wrapped up into studying and looking at all these things where it's like you miss your family, you miss those around you,
right.
You miss the opportunities.
Right.
That's scary and really treacherous stuff.
I think that's a powerful statement you just made. I really believe that that's where the Christian community loses a lot of credibility.
Oh, I do too.
Because I feel like those things are weaponized and they become a club that if you don't understand it, you're not at a certain rank in that club. That's something that just pushed me away from it. And this is kind of leading into, we accidentally segued into the next section, but I think I want to play on this a little bit here because, we create our knowledge as king, it's the further, that's where I struggle with religion is because what I know about the religion means that I know where I stand over you. And let me tell you something, as a person in recovery, that wasn't sure I wanted anything to do with God. I was being told that that's something that was important in my life. I'm not sure that I was like, that was not even part of on the radar for me. I wanted to drink, and so if you're going to come at me and tell me what I must do, 100% I'm not going to listen to you. And we're going to have probably a bigger problem depending on how offensive you are about that to me in that moment in my mind. What is important to me is those that just sat next to me and I knew nothing about that.
Yes.
That is where the split came for me. People that had unbelievably different value systems and walks of life that sat next to me helped me during this journey. And so where the reason I push on this, I'll be pushing on this with you here is because it's a hallmark of what I believe to be true about my own journey and why I don't sit here in front and say with, throwing Bibles at the monitor and everything else. And why I can sit across from somebody that because at face value, they're a murderer, but in reality, they're a very devout follower of their faith. I would never have known that if I'm just not willing to be part of their life as a fellow traveler.
Right.
I can be
Absolutely.
100% me without making you be 100% me.
Yeah, absolutely. That's well said.
But at the same time, if you want what I have and I'll go to any length to get it.
Yes.
I can share with you my journey. And if it makes sense for you, you can walk with me.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I say that decisively for my retrospective look at my life. But this leads into, the next part of this conversation, because I can get pretty wound up about this, but is really, what is a Christian? And this is for my community. You and I, we're pretty aligned on this. What is a Christian versus religion? Because a lot of the responses for those, I think most of us when we're in broken places realize when we get to that crossroads, we can't do it anymore. I can't take it anymore. I know I need something else. So we look at that spiritual component, and a lot of us recognize there's something beyond us. When the God conversation comes up, Christian is a label, religion is a label. Many times they're interchangeable. And there's always a reason why God, and more so in the recovery community as time goes on, is no longer an option. So I'd like to talk to you about, what is a Christian versus religion to you?
Yeah, I'll start with what's a Christian. There's one verse in the Bible that summarizes all of Scripture. So if you want to know the sort of the cliff note of what the whole Bible is about, it's John 3:16. For God so loved the world, and that's important. That's an important statement right there, because a lot of people have this misunderstanding of God, and is He a God of love? Well, He loves the world so much that He sent His only Son, Jesus Christ. That whoever believes Him will not perish but have eternal life, And so the reality of it, it's all about relationship. So a Christian is in a right relationship with God through Jesus Christ. As a Christian, I believe Jesus literally died for my sins on the cross and was resurrected for my salvation. And so my relationship with God through Jesus Christ, Jesus is God, but we don't want to get into that. But as we look into the fact that it's a relationship, Christianity is about people who have a right relationship with God. When I call myself a Christian, or if you look at me and say, wow, he is a Christian, then hopefully what you're seeing is a disciple, someone who's following after Christ. It's someone who's in relationship with Christ, who's following Christ, and is on mission with Christ. And when you share what his mission is, look how Jesus interacted with people. Jesus, when he looked at the religious elite of the day, he saw some hypocrisy, and he called them out, and he called them out strongly. And yet you see him, they said, oh, look at him. He's at the house of drunkards, he's at the house with sinners. He's hanging out with people. And one particular situation we know in Scripture, he was at Zacchaeus' house, and Zacchaeus isn't a religious person, but he's invited Jesus to come over, and we don't know what happened. We don't know the conversation. We have no idea. But Zacchaeus stands up in the middle of this party with all of his friends and says, today, basically, I'm going to choose a different path. I'm going to choose the path that Jesus is talking about. That's the way it has to happen. It has to be a person's choice. When you look at the history of any faith system, any religion, any time it's been forced upon a people, it hasn't gone well.
Right.
Because you can't force people to enter into a relationship, but you can be present and you can love, you know what I'm saying? And you can be in conversation. And like you said, if they're interested, I'm more than willing to walk alongside them. I don't care who they are. But if not, that's between them and the Lord. That's not my job. Isn't to beat people over the head with the Bible. It's for myself to be able to be conformed to that Bible, so that people can see something in me that maybe they would want.
Right. You said a lot there I think is important. And when I think of how you frame that is different than I think how we as a society view Christian, what a person when they call themselves a Christian. We view, I think generally speaking, if I look at my community, we view Christians as telling us what to do, how to live our life, and immediately we're looking for the hypocrisy. And we're saying, oh, really? Are you really going to tell me how to live my life? Don't tell me that you're not doing this, this, and this. And we will do that. And I've done that. I still do it, and I are one, But so I think that the way you frame that is really just about, there's Jesus's version of it, he can tell you what's up. But, as us, we are living this life understanding who our loyalty is, where our love and direction comes from, and where our, in a lot of ways, our identity as we grow.
Yes.
For me, the next question then becomes, is where those worlds interchange? Because I think the further we get away from what you described as a Christian and gets away from the legalistic version of it that says that, I can't associate with this person because they're an addict, or that girl's a this, or she's living with that guy, and this type of stuff, and we start putting that on people. Nobody wants that. And honestly, the other thing too that and so this translates into the religion part is we feel like, I guess we'll stop there for a minute. I mean, with religion, where those two interchange, where Christian and religion is, how would you address that to somebody that says, I'm not into religion? And when you're just talking and said, well, I have an option. When you think about spiritual things, God still can be an option for you. You don't have to choose it, but it is one. And they say, well, I'm not into religion.
Right. And I understand what they're saying. So if we say a religion is a set of beliefs, then I'm a part of a religion. But if we're talking about what most people mean when they say, look, I'm not into religion,
right?
I love it when they say that, because I go, well, neither am I. And they go, wait a minute, you're a pastor, but I'm not trying to trick them, but I understand what they mean. And I'm not into that either. I'm into a relationship. I'm in a relationship with God. I'm into a relationship with people. And so I think where the conflict becomes is there are some who, and look, I'm not trying to judge anybody. I got enough faults on my own, but there are some who try to It's all about behavior modification, right? And sometimes, let's be honest, as there's people who are Christian who they just are uncomfortable around certain behaviors. And so if you would just behave differently, you could make me feel more comfortable.
Right.
And so even when we look at, people say well, there's no do's or don'ts in the Bible, or there are do's and don'ts. Let me let you in a little secret. There are do's and don'ts in the Bible. There's a parameter of safety that the Lord lays out there. But to expect people to enter into like behavior modification before they ever have a relationship makes no sense. And so one of my mentors years ago said, there's a couple of job descriptions out there. There's a job description for a Christian. He said that job description is really clear. Know Jesus, know the Bible, by the power of God, do your best to live by it, right? He said the job description for people who aren't Christian is to not be Christian. And he says, so don't expect people who aren't Christian to live by the job description of a Christian.
I see what you're saying.
But if you are a Christian, don't pick up the job description of a non-Christian.
Okay. So
and so there's and that allows us to have conversations with one another and respect each other. As a believer, I believe we're all made in the image of God.
Right.
And so whether you're a Christian or not, you're an image bearer of my God. And that means I need to treat you with respect and love.
Right. So, and I know we did some call prep, but there's no way that this flowed this way on purpose. But it actually flowed well within the next question I had really around because you said the two job descriptions. So I feel like a lot of times when we're in the one job description, we're telling other people to behave in a way when they're functioning in a completely different job description.
Absolutely.
And that's where the animosity starts.
Yeah, sure it does.
So then where we go to the next level of that, and so keep in mind, the context of what I'm addressing here today is I'm not trying to have a revival on the Chris and Retro podcast, okay? This is not what this is. What it is that I have questions.
Yeah.
And others do too. So I want to get us back to the center of what we're doing here. I have questions. I happen to be a Christian, and I got questions. I don't like how fellow Christians behave. I can't stand the judgment and the nonsense. I can't stand that people think they know everything. We just don't. We're a lot of times we're lost. What I appreciate is the relationship component and that type of thing. However, we are human beings that like to have a team, and our team wants your team to do what we want to do. And as we start to get close to politics, we label Christianity to politics all the time. And I'm curious why we do that, and is it authentic?
Yeah, I think first of all, I call myself an amateur historian, and every historian out there would wince, because whatever. But I know a little bit about history, especially of our country, and our Christianity had a big role in the Revolutionary War. So from the very beginning of our country, this mixing, if you will, of faith and politics has been there, and I think in some ways rightly so, and in some ways not healthily, And so let me describe that just really quick. For instance, my faith does influence my politics. When I go and vote, my faith influences who I vote for, what I vote for, and it should. If you have a belief system, and everyone has one, so whatever your belief system is, if you're going to be consistent to that belief system, it's going to influence the way that you make decisions. Voting is a decision we have. The problem I see is when we all of a sudden, it's not about issues, it's not about that person, it's about a party. If you're a Christian, you got to be a part of this party, and if you're a Christian, you have to think this way. And well, once you've done that, first of all, there's no conversation.
Right.
And going back to what I've said about relationship, I want to have conversations with people.
Right.
And so what I believe in. Anyone who knows me knows. I'm pretty black and white on what I believe in, right? But that doesn't stop me from wanting to learn what other people believe in. What are they thinking? I want my thinking challenged. I'm not afraid to have my thinking challenged. And I want to grow. And that's the only way I can grow. And so I think this whole... I'll be honest with you. We had some people recently leave the church over the fact that I'm not political enough from the front. I'm okay with that, because my job is to share the love of Christ in the scriptures, and then have people apply them to their life. It's not my job to get up there and, if someone wants to pay me big bucks to be their campaign person, I'll do it. Pay me big bucks for that, but I'm not going to do it up front in a church. I'll do it the way it should be, And that's not to say that we don't talk about issues. I have strong feelings from Scripture on issues, and we do deal with those issues in the church where I pastor. but the way we deal with it is scripturally.
Right.
It's not political.
I think that as you were saying that, I just dawned on me. We've known each other for quite a while and had a number of conversations that are very personal conversations, really dealing with some very tough things. And I don't know your political position, and I'm fine with that.
And I love that, actually.
Yeah, because I really don't. I mean, I get a sense of it because I think that some of our belief systems follow the same line. So, there's really not a lot of gray in what that looks like. But I appreciate the fact that you're not using the religion or the church or your Christianity to influence politics, because I feel like that is such a twisted environment. And here's the danger. We're talking about hope here. Again, I'm not trying to diminish the fact that if there's a revival going on the show here, by all means, it was beyond me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm not trying to say we don't want that if that's there, but that's not what this was about. The about is that when you're lost, there's hope. Yeah. And you're going to find hope in a lot of different ways. The problem that we have is that if I'm lost, and if Chris comes alongside somebody that's lost, I just need to be Chris.
Yes.
In that moment, for that person, whoever it is, to make eye contact with them and just sit with them and figure out what their next move is so they can make one more step so that someday you can find this traction they need to get onto the life they need. What I'm finding in the Christian community right now is that you either have a Trump hat on or a Biden shirt on, and that is who you're defined as. Because you've taken that as your mantra and your flag, and you're going to fight everything based on that first. And if I am making that my identity, I'm never going to be able to sit alongside anybody.
Yeah, and I don't look. People need to live their life the way they want to live their life. They can wear the shirt or hat they want to wear, and that's their decision. But at the end of the day, when I go back to really where we started, when you asked the question even a little further in about what a Christian is, I'm in a relationship with God through Jesus Christ. I want other people to be in that relationship, unbiasedly so. Mm-hmm. If someone comes and talks to me, especially when they find I'm a pastor, they know I'm coming from a particular perspective. Mm-hmm. But I want them to be able to talk. I want to be able to have a conversation. So I want to be able to take out any barrier there is in the midst of that conversation. So I'm going to watch what I wear to a certain extent because I care about the opportunities that could be out there. I've had conversations with people. I don't know what they're going through. And for me, other people say, well, it's coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence. I believe God has divine appointments for me. There's times where I'm out in the community, I'm having a conversation. They don't know I'm a pastor. They don't know anything about me. In fact, I don't hide it because I'm ashamed of it. I just don't want to change the conversation. Once people find out you're a pastor, all of a sudden they go to Sunday school every week, and they haven't been in church their entire life, right?
You had that golf story that was kind of funny.
Right. Yeah. And so there's this whole reality in that. And so I'm not ashamed of that. I just want to be able to have conversations, real conversations about where people are at. And here's the reality. When life isn't going well, when it's garbage, they don't care what my political view is.
No.
And my political view won't even help them in that situation. If I really believe as a Christian that the hope of the world is Jesus Christ, then my hope is in a conversation, but they can see that.
Right.
And if they can see that, then win.
Yeah, I like that. I got called out on social media by somebody that was very liberal, was in the middle of a debate with somebody that was very conservative.
Sure.
I didn't happen to be in the debate.
Sure.
But I made a comment about it. I go, oh joy, here comes political season again, where everybody hates each other. And because that's the part I don't like, and I will be vocal about that. Yeah. And that was called out. Said, well, what do you believe in?
Sure.
I can't. I'll say what I believe in. If you want to know what I believe in being the best father I can possibly be, because I was a disaster for so stinking long, and I love my kids so much. I am a Christian. Yeah. A very troubled mind that is struggles with that walk, but I understand my true north in that space, and I know that there's hope and help in my life. I'm a person in recovery with all the challenges that every other person has, and I will come alongside somebody in my worst possible day, and I'll come alongside them not because I'm some saint, but because I know I get stronger because I can help them be stronger. It's a way I get to keep it. That's who I am. But I have voting preferences based on issues.
Yes.
And that doesn't make me great. It's just a choice I've made. It's the only way I can operate, maybe because I'm a caveman.
No, and then we both are.
Yeah.
I think at the end of the day, I mean, anyone who knows me really well knows I'm very political. That's a shocking reality. I mean, I'm on top of it. I could lose myself in political discussion. It matters to me. But at the end of the day, if you were to say, who am I don't want to be defined by that. And again, as a Christian, we talk about a whole nother kingdom. The kingdom of God. That's my kingdom. That's where my primary citizenship is.
Right.
Do I love my country? I do. Would I give my life for my country? I would like to think I would. But no, I'm not going to put my country over God's kingdom. And in conversations, he gets the priority. And so anything that I would do to stop that. Interesting enough, I have people I've encouraged to run for politics. I said, man, I think you can make a difference. I like what you stand for. Go for it. I'll support you.
Right.
I don't support him as a pastor. I support him as Craig, as their friend, as someone who would. I had a friend who was running for office, and I helped stuff envelopes for him.
I had a former Republican congressman sitting in the seat you're
that's
sitting right now.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So it's not that I'm not political. I don't want to sound like I'm some, wow, above all that. I'm not. We live in a world where politics matter. Issues matter. And you know what? I can't say I love people and not vote what I believe is best for people.
Right.
But at the end of the day, if that conversation is going to stop me from being able to have a conversation with somebody, I'm not going to go there.
Yeah, and I think that what happens is either noble intent or righteous indignation or whichever it is turns into debate over politics. And I think most of us start from a cause that we believe in. And it's usually a human-based cause that matters. I don't think people are really obviously voting for money. They're voting for their wallet and they're voting for gas prices and things like that. But I don't think they would obviously go out there and say, I want my politician to make more money than the other politician. I don't think they would ever do that, but we'll accuse the other one of doing that. So I think that we forget what the conversation should be all about. And when it comes to God and the conversation with God, we dilute the message of hope. So again, retrospectively, when I look back at my life, the option for hope was not God early on.
Right.
But people came alongside me that believed that was an option, and they never badgered me with it.
Yeah.
The very first person I've said, and he was on this show, not to violate any of the AA principles or anything like that, but in Alcoholics Anonymous, one of the things that they encourage, it's not through promotion, but we want to be so strong in our recovery as a community that others want what we have.
Absolutely.
And the very first time I saw that was early on in one of my AA meetings. I was still struggling with addiction, and Eric Foster stood up. And he had what I wanted, and I had no idea what it was. I just heard it in him. All these years later, I found out he was 3 months into his recovery.
Wow.
What turned his recovery is being on his knees in front of a drug dealer with a gun in his head. That man, because of that journey, had what I wanted. I knew nothing about him. Come to find out, here he comes alongside of me, a friend even still today. And he had shared with me his notion of what spirituality was, and it was God. And so those influences, and it wasn't him, and it wasn't my father, and it wasn't all these other people, but they all collectively brought the pieces together so that a man that really couldn't stand the church or anything about it saw that as the only option spiritually for me. And so if you walk away from the show today with all this jibber jabber about Christianity and God and angels screaming from the ground, consider, I'm asking you as an audience member, consider it as an option, regardless of what your bias was or how you were brought up. I was brought up in a Christian home, and I hated God, and I don't know if I ever hated God. That's not probably fair. I might have. I couldn't stand religion. I couldn't stand what the church brought to the table. Couldn't stand Christians and their hypocrisy. But how does that man turn around and find that was the only solution to lay his entire inventory in front of? So that's what I'm saying. Consider it as an option, no matter where you are. But we still have all these other things that we're doing as we're dealing with life stuff.
Yes.
So my next, thought we worked through here is we run a little bit short on time, but the addiction community and those that are really struggling. What role do you believe the church plays in that? Because I've got an angle on that concerns me about how the church actually interacts in that community. I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I think we're placed here for to really, we would say, to honor God in our decisions, but also for one another. And so we need to be a place and understand, when I say church, I'm not talking about buildings. I'm talking about the people, right? The church are people. They're not buildings. And when I talk about the church needs to be available. They need to be present. And there's a big one. Like when you say people won't look, some people won't even look them in the eyes, you got to be present. You got to be available. You have to see yourself on the same level. In other words, there isn't a hierarchy in humanity. Like, we're all on equal footing at the cross, is what I like to say. We're all on equal footing. And even in my own life, I know I'm not what I ought to be, but I thank God I'm not what I used to be. I'm a work in progress. And when you see yourself like that, you see the hope for other people. And the church needs to be a place where people can find that hope. I mean, we have a vital role, because the purpose of the church is to share that hope with others. So it's not just, does the church play a role? My personal belief, they play the role.
Right.
And so it breaks my heart when I hear you say, this was my experience with church people. I'm like, that's horrible. And I would just encourage anyone out there, if that's your experience, keep looking, because that's not all of us, and I'm not putting myself better than them.
No.
Certainly there's things you might see me do. Like, I always joke, but it's sort of true. I don't put anything Christian on my vehicle, because I don't always drive like a believer, and so I don't want to blow it, And so, so there's
noticed the front lawn's all ripped up out here.
Yeah, that's right. You want to do some,
There's no snow for the 4-wheel drive.
Yeah, exactly. And so, so I'm not trying to say, look, I'm not no super Christian. I'm just a person on a journey who's being changed by Jesus. But I believe God can do that for everybody.
Right.
I love that hope.
The fellow traveler notion, I think, is important.
It is.
So here's some information that's real information. So in our community, there's roughly 30 churches that were in a close proximity, and they had an addiction summit that only 18 of those churches showed up to. And there was only 18 signed up for, and there was probably 15 representatives in the room. For the addiction community, it wasn't touched. And what also I've noticed is, especially as you get out in the more rural churches, it's a moral failure if you're an addict. You have to go to the church to get better. That's not the role the church should play in addiction. The church is as you said, the word, we're hope.
Yeah.
As a Christian human being, not the structure of the church, but as a person that believes that God was my spiritual option and my solution, I should be that voice to provide hope for somebody else if I'm convicted of it. Interestingly enough, I think it was Penn or Teller, one of the two, came out and he's an atheist.
Yes.
And he said that he would be, it's just completely wrong for a Christian not to be so convicted. Why would they, if they're not convicted, then they shouldn't say anything. Because he had a guy actually come and witness to him after one of his shows, and he said he appreciated him so much because he was so convicted.
He honored that.
Yeah, because he went up and talked to him.
He lived according to his beliefs.
Right, and so we all should. I mean, we shouldn't apologize for it, and I don't. But what I think is that we think that the church is going to fix those components yet. And over time, obviously the spiritual component is there. But with addiction and mental health, my opinion is that this is a medical issue. That the church has a role in with a spiritual component. And so we're not going to bring people in, I don't think, and have them just come into the seats and then walk out and everybody's clean. It's just everybody's sober.
When you talk about mental health issues and addiction and all these things, I have a good friend right now who happens to be a pastor outside Cleveland who's struggling with pancreatic cancer.
Oh, wow.
And watching his journey and sort of being there, hearing his story has been profound to me, because he's learning so much. He's having bad days, good days, he's being really honest about his struggles, but he's a great witness. And when I look at him, I don't say to him, well, look, if you just spent more time in a building with a cross on it, you'll be okay.
Yeah.
When he's going for his treatments, I'm praying for him, Cool thing is, when he's having his treatments, he's praying for others. He says, hey, put a prayer list together. I'm going to be there for like 4 to 6 hours. Let me know so I can be praying while I'm doing this. Why do I say that? I say, well, because God doesn't remove us from the world. There is a place called paradise, but that's after this life. This life, we're still here, where there's going to be pain, there's going to be loss, there's going to be sickness. And we bring hope into those situations, so that a person like my friend John, who's going through the treatments right now, has hope. He has people around him who are caring for him and loving him, and where he's feeling weak, they can be a strength for him. That's how we have to be for each other, and that's what I mean by the church being the hope. My goodness, if you need help, and drive someone to get that help, be there for them, and that's what the church is called to do. And when the church operates historically the way it ought to, that's what the church has done, whether it be the Great Plagues, whether it be lately COVID, all those things. When the church is the church, it shines brightly when it's being what it should be, which I'm talking about the people, again, living for Jesus on journey with others.
Right. And for people that are not necessarily seeking, being exposed to church, I think where things fall apart is when they start looking at the people in the building,
Absolutely.
rather than what the message actually is. And so that's one of the challenges I have in life, is to make sure that my message is authentic.
Yes.
I want to be Chris. I want to be Chris everywhere, and Chris has this component.
Yeah.
And and hopefully that's the reason that things work out well for me, because I don't, my own decision making a lot of times I don't trust at all anymore, really. But
You used the word caveman.
Yeah.
I think for me, maybe I'm a caveman Christian too, because I just don't have the brain power to try to be more than me. I present where I'm at, and that's all I have.
Yeah, it's a capacity issue.
Yeah, it's a capacity issue. I'm not smart enough to be fake. So
I hear you. Yeah, my hustle is limited.
yes.
But I did have, speaking of hustle, this is a question. How can I tell if somebody's lying to me about God? What's you would tell? Because there are some people that come across that, especially in the YouTube universe and all these other social platforms, they come across as authentic and real, and it sounds all good, and the words are real similar. How can I know if they're lying?
Yeah, I think, that's a really good question. It's not an easy question to answer, but I think first of all, is what they're sharing about them or about God. Mm-hmm. It can be about what God's done in them, but if it's all them, and sometimes you hear that, right? Like, I've heard messages from pastors, and at the end I thought, man, that's a great person. Mm-hmm. Not God, them, right? Because gotcha. And that's to me a real indicator. If what they're saying isn't centered around God, if it's not centered around Jesus Christ as Savior, I wouldn't be rude, but that'd be it. I'd walk away from that conversation if you're pursuing the things of God and that's what you're hearing, not hearing those things. But if they're talking about themselves, if they're trying to lead you in a path, if to come to Christ you got to buy a book. I would head out of that conversation.
So no Kleenexes, book, or medallions.
Well, it's about a relationship. So if they're not talking relationship, and if they're not speaking humble of themselves, and a lot about God, what God can do, not what I can do, what God can do. All I can offer a person is my story and the promise that I believe with all my heart that God has a purpose for them too. Mm-hmm. It's on Him. He'll use me in those conversations, but there's a real key indicator. I think many times, a lot of times when we hear those individuals, and I try not to listen to them, right, that aren't representing God really, but they're using God to represent themselves.
Right.
That's not of God.
My thing, my tell on whether somebody's lying to me about it, because I even now still get like stumped sometimes, is if they're the liaison. Like if anytime I see somebody's the liaison, so they have a spiritual feeling, or they had a vision, or they have an understanding that you must know. And I'm not saying that to me the distinction, and maybe this is immature of me, but the distinction is if it's from a life learned experience that they went through, and it's not some emotionally charged craziness that they only knew about, that's a big tell for me.
Yeah, outside of Scripture, which I believe wholeheartedly in. I believe God has a really good ability to be God, which means He can speak to you. Mm-hmm. And so there are certain areas that we can sit across, and I can say, "Hey, what you're doing isn't according to the Word or whatever," because you and I are both believers, so we can have those conversations, right? Mm-hmm. We're on the same job description. Mm-hmm. But what I'm not going to do is say, "Hey, God told me that this is your next step." Unless He really did. I'm not saying He doesn't speak like that. I'm just saying, man, they should be few and far between.
Right.
I think God will tell you what you need to hear. Now, I've had conversations with people where God sort of nudged me to say something. The person said, well, that really affirms what God was telling me. Mm-hmm. That's great. But I don't want to try to play I'm not God's oracle in that way.
Right.
I'm a fellow journeyman. I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. I want to represent Him well. And
right.
that's my job description.
So I think that parlays well into kind of the close. I do appreciate you being here and sharing some of these things, and I think that it's hard to have these conversations without hearing your passion for what you believe to be true, and I think that it does present a viable option credibly to those that are trying to understand all these questions. But I guess I know you're a pastor, but you're definitely a different animal of a pastor than I probably have ever met in my life. What is your purpose? Is it to be a pastor, or would you identify your purpose as something different than that?
Yeah, I came up with a purpose statement. That was a real big deal, especially in the time when I was growing up. You had to have your purpose statement, and so I came up with a purpose statement probably junior or senior in high school, and it really hasn't changed much.
Gotcha.
And that's to do anything short of sin, to call and lead people into an active relationship with Jesus Christ. That's true of my kids, true of my wife, true of my friends. And anything short of sin doesn't mean I like try to flirt with that line.
Right.
It just means, when I was a student pastor, if free pizza would get people there to have a conversation, I'd get free pizza, man. I mean, anything to allow people to sit at the table, to have the conversation, and somehow to call them, whether it be through my life or through the conversation, that, man, there is hope in Christ. And to lead them, which means there's a lot of responsibility there that I don't want to just be a lip service to what God can do. I want to be an example.
Understood.
And that means that I got to live authentically.
Right. And I think that you pull that one off because, that's one thing that from my community, the recovery community, and those of us that, even from a business perspective or anything else, one of the things we struggle with is finding authenticity in this world. Everybody says they're authentic, but they're not. There's a lot of people that really struggle to find out who they actually are. I think it's one of the things that's baffling, and why I love being able to have my own show is it is going to be baffling for people to understand how it is that some of the characters I've had on here all mesh. How does that all mesh? How can I have somebody that's just been professing about who God is for the better part of an hour and have, others on with heavy criminal past activities and others that live lives that are definitely not aligned with, Christian beliefs and, congressmen and best-selling authors, and how does it all fit together? Well, to me, it fits together in that these are all things to look at as you're looking at ways to avoid problems and to get yourself out of a mess if you really need to see hope. One takeaway I have from some of the comments you've made today is that, and it does align with my belief system, is it's not an emotional journey. This is about knowing and understanding truth and becoming stronger at who you are with every single day. That's a very basic principle of recovery. And you even mentioned it a couple different times early on about your focus on today, what you need to do today. For the audience, I mean, I guess I'll leave with this. What keeps you motivated, and how do you keep your stamina up? Because I mean, to have this type of a conversation, however many times a week you have it, how do you stay motivated? How do you keep your stamina?
I believe it. I don't know how else to say it. I believe what I've been sharing, and I've seen the life change in me. I've seen the life change in others, and by the way, there's times I don't have it.
Right.
Let me just be honest. There's times I don't have it. There's times I'm getting ready to preach a message. I'm not feeling it. And you know what? There's some of the best messages because
I'd panic.
Yeah. Well, yeah. You just take a deep breath, get up there. It's going to happen. Am I fake? No. I just present what truth is there. And so I don't know. The stamina comes and goes, but the excitement of being able to do what I do is an amazing thing. And the fact of being a pastor just sort of adds to it. So I actually would be doing what I'm doing in some ways if I was a pastor or not.
Right.
Being a pastor just allows me to lead a bunch of people to do it too in the church. And so, yeah, I don't know. I believe it. And if you believe in something, really believe in it, and then take it a step further and say, because I believe in it, I'm willing to do the work. And there is work, right? To walk in this belief. That gets you up. That gets you going. Like I said, I don't wake up in the morning loving anybody. I don't feel it, at least. I do love them, but I don't feel it.
Yeah.
But I do wake up anticipating a day, anticipating what can happen, and knowing that the good, the bad, and the ugly. But again, I can go back and be confident on what God has for me.
Okay. I think that's powerful. The way that you approach things, again, it's very similar principles to a lot of things. It's who your heart, what your heart is, what's driving you, what your vision is for that. Those are all things that motivate a lot of people. The stamina sounds to me like you're aligned with what you were called to be, and that's important. I do appreciate you coming on the show.
Oh, honor.
Man,
great to be here, man.
I'm glad you're here. I have a lot of questions, always will. As my journey continues, and then this season of life that we're currently going through is taxing, to say the least. My faith will continue to be challenged. I respect the tools that have been offered to me beyond faith, and those are all things that help you get through hard times. For the audience, I hope you guys heard what was being said today. This was not a conversion effort by any means, and not to try to get you, well, I wouldn't say by any means. It wasn't a conversion effort by objective. What the point was is to show that this thing that we continue to call not an option absolutely is an option, and for people like me, it was the option. I would say that as you're going down your journey here, take a look at some of the craziness that's out there. When you start making decisions relative to your spiritual component, try to cut through the noise. look at the truth of what you're reading and hearing, and see how that fits with you and how it plays out down the road. Is it just a feeling now? Does it have any teeth to it, meat to it? I believe this does. It has for my life anyway. For the fellow travelers out there, that's what we all are. Keep making progress. You don't have to do your whole life today. Just do it the best you can do today. And by all means, until we speak again, please stay out of trouble.